Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. Hello, Hillary here again with another solo episode for you. Now, last week I talked about how your best marketing is probably hiding behind the scenes in your CRM, in your client notes, maybe even just in your brain, because in all that good stuff are some really powerful, compelling stories about the work that you do with clients. And that is what prospects want to see and hear from you. It's what differentiates you. They want to see how you work. They want to see the kind of work that you do. They want to know what they can expect. And they want to know if you understand their situation. So if you are an advisor who has a really clear niche, which I hope you are, you want to attract the same types of clients that you're currently working with. And so by talking about your clients' experiences and their outcomes and their fears and their stories, more of those types of clients who are not working with you yet are going to see that, and they are going to see, oh, they can help me with this exact problem, and they are going to reach out to you. So I got some really good responses to that episode from last week. A few of you reached out and said things like, okay, I know I have client stories, but I've done case studies before and they haven't really done anything for me. I don't think they're working. And that is exactly what I want to talk about today, because having case studies is not the same thing as having good case studies. And I see this a lot, and I know it's frustrating because case studies take a while to create. You have to gather a lot of details. You have to write it all up. You have to try to tell it as a good story. But when the case studies themselves fall flat, they're not moving the needle. Prospects aren't reading them and thinking, wow, I need to call this person. They might not even be reading them at all. They might be clicking them open and then seeing this is just a big old list of like information and stats and jargon that I don't understand. And so they don't feel anything and they move on. So today I want to walk you through the most common mistakes I see advisors making with their case studies so that if you have them, you can look at yours with fresh eyes. And if you don't have them yet, you can avoid these traps from the very beginning. So let's get into it. Now, the first mistake, and this is probably the most common one I see, is what I call the kitchen sink. And this is when you try to cram every single thing you have ever done for a client into one case study. And I know a lot of you have been working with your clients for several years, 5, 10, maybe even 20 to 30 years. And so there is a lot that you have walked through with them and a lot of strategies that you have done. And it's hard to figure out which ones go into the case study and which ones don't. Now, part of the reason why this happens too is because you want to demonstrate the breadth of what you do. If you're a comprehensive financial planner, you want to show how you helped them with tax planning and education planning for their children's college and retirement planning and risk management and connecting them with an estate planning attorney and doing the Social Security optimization and charitable giving and investment management, like literally all of the things. And so by the time you're done, you've written what is essentially a service menu disguised as a client story. And the problem with that is that there's no narrative thread. The story is lost at that point. It's just a list of things that you did, and nobody is connecting emotionally with a list. And we want them to connect emotionally with every single case study that you put out there. And you know what? I have actually seen this in my own work when I'm developing case studies for advisors. So the way that my process works when I work on case studies is I sit down with advisors for an interview first. So I interview the advisors themselves. We figure out what are the actual case studies that we want to write? What are your most compelling client stories, your most compelling client wins? So we decide that. We start to dig through some of the details, and then I send them a very detailed questionnaire so that they can take that questionnaire, they can go into their CRM or their client note system or whatever they have, and they can fill all of that out. They can give me everything that they can find about these clients. So then I take those answers and I shape them into the story. And what I get back in those questionnaires is almost always the kitchen sink. The advisor gives me everything, which is what I've asked them to do. They give me every strategy, every account type, every number, every percentage. And I love that they do that because I need all of that raw material. But my job is then to figure out, what is the actual story? What is the through line here? And what is the one transformation that's going to make a prospect lean in? And oftentimes, when a prospect comes to you, they come because they have one specific problem that's top of mind. Now, they may have 5 or 6 different problems that you help them identify and you work on with them over a period of several years. But what is the one problem that is painful enough that they come to you with? And so that's really the story that we want to land on with the case study, because we want to meet the prospect where they are at. We don't want to overwhelm them with everything we can help with at this point in time. That comes later. We want to meet them at this one point in time with the biggest, most painful problem, the thing that they're most worried about. And that's what we want to bring through in the case study. So let me give you a quick example. I worked on a case study for an advisor whose clients were a couple. They'd been with the firm for almost 30 years. I actually talked about this example in last week's episode. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, you absolutely should. So in the raw material, the questionnaire that the advisors gave me, there was so much that this advisor had done for them. They had done investment diversification, unwinding of a really concentrated position. They had worked with them on their grandchildren's education funds, charitable giving, tax optimization, on and on and on. But the real story that actually made someone feel something was about the vacation home. So this couple had dreamed for years and years of buying a winter home in Florida where they could golf with their friends. But they were so cautious, they were so protective of everything that they had built that they told their advisor, if the numbers don't shake out, to give us complete confidence, we are totally fine walking away from this idea. They knew they weren't going to risk their retirement for something that felt like just a dream. So the advisor modeled the whole thing out, the cost of 2 properties, how expenses would shift when they eventually sold one, the long-term cash flow, the tax picture if they were to choose Florida as their primary home base down the road versus I think they lived in Minnesota, and showed them with real confidence that they actually could do it and they could have this thing that they'd been dreaming about without risking everything. And so that is a story. There are stakes there. A prospect reads that and thinks, I have a dream like that too. I wonder if I could afford it. This couple didn't think they would be able to afford it. And just by doing some modeling that this advisor did that I would have no idea how to do myself, maybe I could have that confidence as well. And so that's the emotional pull that makes someone pick up the phone. That was the type of client that these advisors wanted to work with. And so if I had included everything that the advisor did for this couple over 28 years, that moment would have gotten buried under paragraphs of tax strategy and investment diversification, and the story would have been completely lost. So if you're writing case studies and you find yourself including every single thing that you've done for a client, that's a good sign to stop and ask yourself, what is the one story that I want to tell here? What is the one transformation, the one decision, the one moment that would make the right prospect, the person that I want to work with, see themselves and say, yes, I need to call this person. Now, the second mistake is something that I like to call the financial report. So the first mistake was the kitchen sink. The second mistake is the financial report. And this is when a case study reads more like a performance summary than a human story. So you've probably seen these. These sound something like, client came to us with $2 million in assets and $400,000 a year in income. We restructured their portfolio and implemented a tax efficient withdrawal strategy, and we saved them $60,000 on taxes a year, and on and on and on. And that's not wrong. The numbers matter. I actually like case studies that have specific numbers in there because it makes them feel more real, and it makes the prospect look at those numbers and either filter themselves in or filter themselves out based on the numbers that they're seeing. And those strategies do matter. But does reading that actually make you feel anything? Does it make you excited to call that advisor? If it's just the financial report, I don't think so. And so the thing that's missing there is the person. Who is this client? What was keeping them up at night? What were they afraid of? What did they want their life to look like? What were the stakes for them? What could have happened to them if they hadn't had these strategies that they had implemented? So, another example for you, I worked on a case study where the raw information from the advisor was very technically focused. If you remember from last week, I shared the story of the man in his early 50s who was laid off. He wanted to retire early. Both his father and his brother had passed away before turning 60, so he didn't want to wait until 65 to start enjoying his life because he knew that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. I had to work pretty hard to pull that out of the questionnaire that I got back from advisors. This questionnaire included things like we used the Rule 72T for substantially equal periodic payments to avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty, and we analyzed optimal Social Security claiming strategy. It was all accurate and it was all important, but it was a little bit too jargony to make for a really great case study. The story was this guy lost his job at 53 during the 2008 recession, and he was terrified. He wanted to retire early, but he wasn't sure he wanted to retire that early, so he didn't really know what to do. That's what makes a prospect stop scrolling, not the 72T provision. It was the man who was afraid he wasn't going to make it. And so if you remember from last week, what happened with that client was the advisor did give him the confidence that he could retire early. He ended up moving to the countryside, buying some land. He spent the last almost 2 decades doing exactly what he loves, which is hunting and farming and working the land on his property. His portfolio has grown despite almost 2 decades of withdrawals. And at one point, the advisors actually had to tell him that he wasn't spending enough. So after a lifetime of discipline and saving, he still really needed that permission to enjoy what he built. Now, in the final version of that case study, the technical strategy is in there, but it's in service of the human story, not the other way around, if that makes sense. The strategy explains how this transformation happened, and the story is why you care. So if your case studies are leading too prominently with strategies and numbers and technical jargon, this is where I want you to ask yourself, okay, where's the human in this story? Where's the fear and the dream and the moment of relief? So when you lead with that, you then let the strategy support it. And while I'm talking about jargon, this is a big one. A lot of advisors write their case studies in a way that they want to sound really impressive. They want to demonstrate to their clients, who are often high net worth or ultra high net worth prospects, they want to demonstrate the level of their technical expertise and kind of give that confidence that they know what they're doing. But if a prospect has to Google a term to understand your case study, you've immediately lost them. They're not going to Google it. So write it in the language that your clients actually use when they talk to you. You have to be a really, really good listener here. They don't say, we implemented a tax efficient withdrawal strategy. I don't think. They say, I finally feel like I can retire without worrying that I'm going to get killed on taxes, right? So that's the financial report. Now, the third mistake that I see is actually the opposite of the kitchen sink. This one is called the vague brag. So we have the kitchen sink, the financial report, and the vague brag. And this is when an advisor is so worried about compliance or client privacy that they strip out every specific detail that would make the story actually really compelling and recognizable as a real life situation. So you end up with something kind of like, we helped a client navigate a complex financial transition and achieve their retirement goals. Through comprehensive planning and a customized strategy, they now feel confident about their financial future. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. So you want to answer, who? Who is this? What were they like? What was going on in their lives? What transition are they looking for? What were their goals? What was the strategy? And why should I care? Now, I do understand the impulse here. Advisors are rightfully cautious about compliance, and they, of course, respect their clients' privacy. I talked about this in last week's episode. But when you go too far and you strip out all the specifics, you're stripping out all the things that make that story relatable. Because the power of a client story is in the details. It's the couple who are both educators. They were making $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year. And yet now they have 1.8 million in assets because they've been such diligent savers. It's the guy who wanted land in Iowa. It's the woman who was afraid to look at her portfolio. Those details are what make a prospect think, that sounds like me. That sounds like what I've been dealing with. So, of course, you can anonymize, you can change names, you can change locations, you can change occupations, whatever identifying details you need to swap in and out to make your clients and compliance feel comfortable. That is fine. You can even create composite stories that draw from multiple client experiences who are similar to each other, but you cannot strip out the emotional specificity and still call it a really good story. And a related point that I want to address here, because I have seen this happen with some advisors' case studies, and I think this happens because of compliance concerns, is that advisors will publish case studies with a disclaimer at the bottom that says something like, this case study is hypothetical and does not involve actual clients. And I understand that some compliance departments may mandate this, but if yours does and you want to use client stories, I really recommend pushing back on compliance here and seeing if you can get them to work with you in a way that you do not have to say that this case study is hypothetical. Because if that disclaimer is on your case study at the bottom there, it just completely undermines the entire point of sharing real client stories. The whole reason these stories work is because they're real. And so if a prospect reads a compelling story and then sees this didn't actually happen, you've just broken the trust that you were trying to build. So, my best advice is to have a real conversation with your compliance department, explain what you're trying to do and why, and explain that the goal, of course, isn't to promise results or make guarantees. It's just to show people what it's actually like to work with an advisor. So be clear about what you want to accomplish and then ask them what you need to do to make it work within the guidelines that they've set for you. More often than not, there is a path forward with proper anonymization and disclosures that don't require you to call the whole thing hypothetical. And typically, as long as you're not including things about rate of return and investment performance, a lot of compliance departments can get behind that. So I encourage you to just advocate for yourself and see if you can get them to work with you. So, to recap, those are the big mistakes I see: kitchen sinking everything, leading with the financial report and burying the story, or stripping out so many of the specifics that there's really nothing left to feel or latch onto. So, I don't want to turn this into a whole writing workshop, but I do want to give you just a taste of what the structure of a good client story looks like, because when you get down to it, it's actually quite simple. So, it starts with a title that speaks to a transformation, something that makes people curious to read the story. So, not case study client A or how a doctor reached retirement or whatever it might be, something like how one couple turned an unexpected layoff into a fulfilling early retirement. That makes you want to read it because you see the stakes in there. The unexpected layoff gives it stakes, and you want to find out what happened. How did they do that? So then after that, when someone clicks into the case study, underneath the title, you have a short statement of the problem or the tension. So dig into what was at stake there. What was this person afraid of, or what were they wrestling with? Then you describe who the clients are in real, relatable human terms. You describe what the vision is. What's the goal that they're trying to achieve? Then that's when you can share what you actually did with those real specifics and strategies and numbers when possible. And then you describe the outcome. And this is really important. You don't describe just the financial outcome, but the life outcome, the emotional outcome. What does their life look like now? How do they feel now? And that is it. That's the structure. So while the structure is absolutely important, the real magic is, of course, in finding the right story to tell, pulling out the right details, and then presenting it in a way that makes somebody feel something. And that takes real skill. It's something that I think about quite a lot, and I am going to go much deeper on it very, very soon, which brings me to something I am really excited to share with you. So next Thursday, on April 9th, I'm hosting a free live workshop all about writing really good, compelling client stories. And in this workshop, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to take your behind the scenes client stories and turn them into marketing that actually makes prospects want to work with you. We're going to look at what makes a client story compelling versus forgettable. I'm going to show you some real examples of the difference. And I'm going to break down the storytelling framework that I use with my own clients to create case studies that actually move the needle. So whether you have case studies already that you know aren't working for you yet, you know they're falling kind of flat, or if you've never created one and you don't know where to start, You will learn something in this workshop, I promise you. It is free and it is live on Thursday, April 9th. And I would love to see you there. So you can register at the link in the show notes. And if you can't make it live, there is an option to purchase the replay for just $9. And that $9 purchase also includes a bonus group coaching call the following day, Friday, April 10th, where you can bring a specific client story and we can workshop it together live. So I will drop all the details and the registration link in the show notes, and I really hope to see you there. And as always, if you found this episode helpful, please be sure to subscribe to the Finance Marketing Podcast on your favorite listening app and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you're so inclined. Your support helps more financial professionals find the show, and I am so grateful to you, my listeners. So I will catch you back here next week. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.